So like I said a moment ago, there's no Bible study next week. And if anybody watching online, if you don't get a new one next week, that's the reason why. No Bible study, because there's no school next week. And as I was studying this, as I was preparing, even before I started writing, I thought, oh, gee, I maybe should have broken this one into 2 lessons. It's kind of long. And it is a long chapter, but I think we can get through it. But if we don't, we'll just make it 2 lessons and we'll finish it up next week. Or not next week since there's no Bible study, but on the 28th. And by the way, the 28th is our last lesson. And then we will gather on May the 6th. Jan, I don't know if you knew this, on May the 6th. Yeah, okay. We'll have our combined meal, and anyone watching online is welcome to come. If you would, just email me and let me know that you're coming, just so we can kind of get a count for how many's going to be there. But we really would like everybody that can, that's local. If you want to come to Buffett Heights, or if you need directions, just let me know. So this week we come to probably one of the most well-known stories or incidents in the book of Genesis. This is one of those that I call those claim to fame chapters. If you don't know anything else about Genesis, you probably will know the story of Jacob and Esau. And I had some things down that I was going to share and do it, and I thought, I don't need to do that because, first of all, you already know this. So is there anyone here who did not know about this story? Did not know about Jacob and Esau? So yeah. But it is a stereotypical, there are stereotypical views. What I was going to ask is, what were the views? What do you know about them? So I'm going to skip that because we'll get into something else here in a moment. But again, the stereotypical view of this chapter is that Jacob was the bad guy. Poor old Esau, he was just an innocent bystander. He got hoodwinked and his blessing stolen. In fact, I got kind of tickled as I was writing this morning, and I had not looked at my eSword software, and so I was looking up some things, and I started seeing some titles for this chapter. So you can tell a lot about a commentary by how they title it. So I saw one that was titled Jacob's Fraud. Another titled it, Jacob Deceptively Gains the Blessing of Isaac. Another titled it, Rebekah Plans to Cheat Isaac. And so there's no question, you know exactly where that commentary is going with that chapter. But one of the best, actually, Henry Morris's commentary, and a lot of our Tuesday morning women are reading that. Henry Morris called it The Mystery of Jacob and Esau. Now that's a good title because it is a mystery. What actually is going on. We don't know their motives. We don't know a lot that's going back on behind the scenes. But like I said, I was going to start the lesson by asking who is innocent and who caused the problem, or who's the bad guy and who's the good guy. But you all are not stereotypical Bible study people. I think you already know that there's a lot more going on here than just the surface picture that we might gain from it. In fact, as we go along, I think we'll see there are no innocent parties in this chapter. There are none that are not guilty. Every single person in this chapter is in some way wrong in what they did.
I have a question.
Yeah.
A couple chapters back, he sold his birthright.
Yeah.
Does that have anything to do with the blessing?
A birthright and a blessing are actually two different things. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get down to that point. But yeah, that happened. And of course, we'll see later that Esau's going to throw that up in his dad's face. But we got to think about that in the beginning. But like I said, every person here is in some way wrong. And yet, God let this happen. I've often looked at this incident, along with many others we've talked about in the Bible, and said, I wonder what would have happened if only they had waited on God. God had decreed that the older would serve the younger. And I've said over and over again, I think I put it in your lesson, God was fully capable of making that happen. in His timing, if only they had waited. But here's the thing that's hit me is the later part of last week as I've been studying this. I've wondered if this might not have been the way that God brought it about. That God allowed all four of these people to have their own way. Think about this. This thought first came in my mind earlier last week when I was watching something on YouTube. And, if you ever watch videos on YouTube, they come up with the suggested videos. Well, I watch a lot of David Barnett, and one of his videos came up as a suggested. And I didn't watch it, but the title of it intrigued me. I don't remember the exact title, but it was something to the effect of how God used Alexander the Great to spread the gospel. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And so I got to thinking about that. And God did, in fact, use Alexander the Great to spread the gospel in an indirect way. If it had not been for Alexander the Great's domination of the known world, the language of Greek would not have gone everywhere around the mid-300 BC area. If Greek had not become the common language, what language would the New Testament have been written in? Because every area had their own language. What language would they have picked? And if whatever one they picked, it would have not been able to be read anywhere else. But because Greek, and I always remember it this way, it was not the classical Greek. It was what was called Koine Greek. It was, and the way I remember that is Koine reminds me of coins, and it was the language of merchants. It was how they bought and sold. So Koine Greek became the language all throughout, even through the Roman period, because Rome, they spoke Latin, but Greek still became the common language because it was known everywhere. So how did God use Alexander, a hedonistic sexual pervert, to spread the gospel? He allowed him to have his own way. So then this week, this week that we're in right now, and if somebody happens to be watching this video at a later date, we are in Holy Week this week. Some have said, we all know what Judas did this week. Some have said Judas didn't have a choice. But Jesus, in speaking of his betrayer in Matthew 26:24, said, "The Son of Man is to go just as it is written of him." And that comes from Psalm 41, verse 9. But, Jesus said, "Woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born." Judas had a choice. But if Judas had not betrayed Jesus, someone else would have, because God said that was how it was going to happen. Again, God allowed Judas to have his own way, to follow his own heart. So in this incident, this might be a different way of thinking about this. In this incident, did God just allow Isaac and Rebekah to follow their own hearts? Did he not just allow them to have their own way? Do you ever think about it that way? That this is actually what God used to make. I was always of the mindset that God would do something miraculous, to make it happen. But the more I've studied this, the more I think this may have actually been what God chose to use. Jeremiah 17 verse 9 says, "The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked." If you just, as the saying goes, if you just cut them loose, if you just turn them loose and let them do what they want to do. There's an old movie, Lord of the Flies. Anybody see Lord of the Flies?
We all had to read that.
I didn't have to read that book. But anyway, and I've just seen bits and pieces of the movie, but someone becomes the head. And it just, if you just turn them loose without any laws or any parameters, yeah, somebody will become the head and somebody will overtake. So just the more I thought about that, I thought that may be it. And so I think God brought about his will by allowing them to have their own way. And I put a note in your scripture, or in your lesson, James 3 verse 16. And if you look that up, it said, "For where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every evil thing." When there's jealousy, and we already know there's jealousy there. When there's disorder, and we already know there's disorder there. When there's dysfunction, and we already know there's dysfunction there. If you turn it loose, this is what you can expect. So any thoughts on that? A little different view on it before we jump into the scripture.
Well, I think a lot of the problem is the fact that Isaac and Rebecca chose favorites.
That everything goes back to that.
And I think all of us know that anytime there's a favorite in the family, it just causes chaos amongst the rest of the kids.
It does. It does. And like we said when we read that verse, that's just trouble waiting to happen. Well, I mean, even if we didn't even know what was going to happen, we knew something would because of that. Exactly. Okay, so as expected, all the commentaries I studied are all over the place with this. Some say it's all Jacob's fault. He was a deceiver. Some say it's all Rebekah's fault. She was manipulative. Others say it's Isaac's fault because he was still trying to circumvent God's will by giving the blessing to Esau. Others say it was Esau's fault because he should have spoken up and reminded his father that it wasn't his to have. But there's enough blame to go around for everybody. So we begin, speaking of old movies, does anybody remember the old movie, The Sting? Robert Redford, Paul Newman. If you remember how that movie played out, there were segments. And I see we have those same segments in this chapter. We have the problem, the plan, the prep, or the preparation, the con, the reveal, and then the epilogue. So that's the way I'm going to break this down. So first we have the problem. Look at verse 1. My translation says, now it came about. The King James Version says it came to pass, meaning that there had been an amount of time that had passed. It came about when Isaac was old and his eyes were too dim to see. Now, reading that, in fact, I made a note in my Bible years ago, I think he had cataracts. Because, when you go to the eye doctor and they got all these posters up and it shows what it's supposed to look like if you've got. Has anybody here had cataract surgery? Mm-hmm. Okay, so does it make that? It makes that kind of difference. Does things just get dim and then?
Shades. It's for me. It was. Well, I have one that has a cataract and one that's been fixed. I can close my eyes and one is like a beige, but the other one is like a bright white. Yep.
That's what my mother said. She said the colors were so bright, and I've heard that from so many people. So that's what I always thought it was. Now it may have been that, or it may have not. But the word itself that's used here for dim simply means weak, and that is how the New International Translation. But there could have been some other disease in Isaac's eyes. And by the way, as I was studying this and reading ahead, looking up something else, in Genesis 48 verse 10, when when Israel, Jacob himself, when he's getting ready to bless Joseph's two sons, while he's down there in Egypt, it says that his eyes were dim with age and he couldn't see. So whatever it is, it could be hereditary.
Well, they don't have sunglasses in the desert.
No. Yeah. So whatever it is, Isaac or Jacob will end up. That comes with something I'll get to later. But again, that's something that Jacob will be able to see back and remember that day, because his father could not see in what he did. But whatever the reason was, Isaac couldn't see. And there's all kind of application that we could say about that he couldn't see Esau's faults, how the Jewish people can't see the Messiah. In fact, the Jewish commentary I have said that Isaac's blindness was more than physical, it was spiritual and emotional. I mean, it was physical, but it was also this, the quote, "There is none so blind as those who will not see." But he saw Esau's strength, courage, or as J. Vernon McGee says, his likability. We talked about this in chapter 25, how the attributes that Esau had are the things that the world loves. Those, man's man, outdoorsy, get it done kind of guy, all those things that the world likes. And Jacob was more the quiet one, the intellectual, and I said in one of the groups, I don't remember which one it was now, it said that, you think about universities, who gets the more money, the sports or the intellectuals, Well, that goes without saying. But that reminded me of Paul's words in 1 Corinthians 1:27, where Paul said about God's choosing the foolish to shame the wise, and choosing the weak to shame the strong. But God looks on the heart. He looks on the motives. But our hearts, as Jeremiah said, are desperately wicked. And so were all four of these. But now think about this. Now I hadn't thought about this before. The Jewish commentary also said that God blinded Isaac's eyes in order to accomplish his purposes. There's just so many things in this that I'm seeing for brand new. That goes back to what we were saying about God using this. But now think about this. If Isaac had not been blind, and he had decided to give Esau the blessing, there wouldn't have been a thing they could do about it. There would have been no way to work around it. He would have just done it. It was his blindness that allowed them to do what they did to bring about this deception. And so Isaac sent for Esau. When Isaac was old, his eyes were too dim to see, he called his older brother Esau and said to him, now look what he says, "My son." He doesn't say our son. He says, "My son." And Esau said to him, actually my translation says Esau said to him, "Here I am." But the word "here" and "am" are not in that. Actually, all Esau said was I. So there he was. So as I said in your lesson, many commentaries, and even many more that I found since I wrote that, say that Isaac was 137 at this time, and they date that backwards from Egypt and Joseph's age. We don't know, though, what made Isaac think that he was near death. Now, we know from chapter 25, verse 17, that Ishmael was 137 when he died. So maybe that was on his mind. Here my brother, I know my dad lived to be 175, but my brother died at 137, and I know the ages are getting shorter, so that's on his mind. Or could have been the fact that he was blind and not able to get out and do anything anymore, and he's just plain depressed. If you're not able to do anything, that'll do it. And maybe on this particular day, in addition to all that, he just felt sick. But Isaac's statement in verse 2, where he said, "Behold now, I am old and do not know the day of my death," it is akin to how a will would start out for us today. "I, so-and-so, being of sound mind." He said that in order to lay the groundwork for what he's about to do. So for whatever reason, he actually thought he was near death. But we know he'll live another 43 years after this. And by the way, at this point, there's about 37 years between chapter 26 and chapter 27. And Esau and Jacob would both be 77 years old.
And still living in their mom and dad's.
Yeah. Well, that's the way they did it. In my father's house are many mansions, many dwelling places. But that's what they would do. Even in Jesus' day, they would build on, But anyway, there they are. But look at what he told Esau. Verses 3 and 4. "Now then, please take your gear and your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare a savory dish for me such as I love, and bring it to me that I may eat, so that my soul may bless you before I die. And what he's saying there, that my soul may bless you, he's saying, I have made this decision. I am the one that's going to do this so that I may bless you. My soul may bless you. It's what I want to do. And, we could, actually I put this in your lesson, we could spend some time here on Isaac's last wishes being all about food, where Abraham was not thinking of himself, but as a wife for Isaac. And I shared it, you may have read some of those, what others did, what their last wishes were. I'm not going to take time to dig into that unless you want to talk about it. But if you think about it, Esau sold his birthright for a bowl of soup, and Isaac was willing to bestow the covenantal blessing for a plate of venison. Maybe like father, like son there, both ruled by their appetites. But anyway, so first of all, why did Isaac send for Esau? Okay, this is what I was thinking about. Did he know the prophecy? Did Isaac know the prophecy and deliberately tried to circumvent the prophecy? Or was he trying to bring Esau back into the family after what we saw at the end of chapter 26? Esau had married these two Canaanite, these two Hittite women, and it says, and they brought grief to both Isaac and Rebekah. And honestly, did Isaac even know about the birthright incident? Did he know that had happened? So we don't know his motive for this. We can guess a lot of different things, whether he did or whether he didn't. One commentary said that this proved that Rebekah hadn't told Isaac about the prophecy, or that he'd forgotten. I'm like, yeah, right. Another commentary said that maybe Isaac had purposely forgotten it. Now, have you ever tried to purposely forget something?
You can.
You can't. That's a sure sign that you'll remember it. I'm going to forget that I'm supposed to go do that because I don't want to go do that anyway. No, you'll remember it in that case. But this was way too significant to have merely forgotten it. And also, it doesn't seem to be Isaac's nature or his personality, as we saw at the end of chapter 26, to blatantly disobey God. So why did he do it?
Because he favored Esau.
Because he favored Esau. How did he think he was going to get around what God said?
Good question.
Why did, well, we know why he favored Esau, because he just, we talked about the opposite personalities and the type of man that Esau was. He did it, I think, but just because he was soft-hearted and because he loved Esau.
And Esau was firstborn.
And Esau was literally, actually, the firstborn, right? So
did he know that that he sold his birthright to Jacob?
That's what we don't know. We're not told that. Now later on we'll see if he didn't know it, he knows it now. But backing up, I thought I had it down, I may have it here later. But backing up, when we see and we talk about the relationship that Rebekah and Isaac had, it was a very close, loving relationship. And the way he prayed for her to conceive, and then she prayed. I can't imagine her not telling him.
He knows that she's having a difficult pregnancy.
Yeah.
And
for her not to tell him that she prayed, I just don't see that happening.
And that the Lord told her that
you
got two nations.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be hunky-dory. Just don't worry.
Yeah. I think there's no way he didn't not know about the prophecy. Now, whether or not he knew about the selling of the birthright, I think he probably did, but he may have not. We can give him that benefit of the doubt there.
We don't really know how old they were when that birthright thing.
No, we
happened.
don't. That's the one time stamp that we don't have.
Right.
Well,
Because it just goes
yeah.
into, it says they were born.
And then it goes into that.
Older.
I always sort of lean toward them being teenagers because of over dramatic. But the more I've studied, and I did hear a sermon, a teaching on it once that said that they were like, it was before Esau was born, so it was before he was 40, but definitely not teenagers. And I can't remember where I heard that. But so we don't know that. But here's another thing. We have to remember that chapter 27 is almost 40 years after chapter 26. And we saw in chapter 26, we saw Esau, we talked about his patience. We talked about his faith. We talked about him just moving on and not fighting for those wells. And then he finally, even though he had many more men, he could have fought, but he kept moving on. And it was not cowardice. He was just trusting the Lord. And then because the Lord had appeared to him early in the chapter and blessed him, and then after he moved again, then the Lord appeared to him again. So we talk about his faith there. How did he end up the way he is now? But again, we're talking about 40 years later, and we're talking about his love for Esau. But the scripture that came to mind when I was thinking about that was Hebrews chapter 2, verse 1, where it talks about drifting. You know, the whole book of Hebrews has a lot about this. It talked about drifting from the truth, and it said, so we must listen very carefully to the truth we have heard, or we may drift away from it. If you've ever known someone who drifted from following close after God, they were gung-ho and they were all there, but over time they drifted away. Perhaps that's what happened to Isaac. Perhaps his love for Esau so overwhelmed him that he drifted away. I mean, these are just speculative, but they're possibilities, I think. But here's another thing that came to mind. Maybe Isaac thought that if he blessed Esau, it wouldn't be going against God, because God's the one that's supposed to appear. God appeared and blessed him. God appeared and blessed his father. God's going to appear and bless Jacob, so I can bless Esau. It'll be okay. You know, there's all kinds of ways you can work around things.
I read a commentary that said that even though selling the birthright happened, that was not binding until the blessing.
Oh, okay.
And I read that from MacArthur.
Yeah. I didn't.
And I don't know if you'd read anything like that or not.
Was that in his study Bible or okay? Because I have the New Testament commentaries, but I know he doesn't. I've got that one, but I didn't go and look at that. But that's a good point. So it maybe he thought if it was just him, that if he did it privately and not in some sort of ceremony, then it's only between him and Esau. You know what we often say about the word rationalize. It's rational lies. That's what you tell yourself.
Well, maybe he thought that, Esau, being the alpha male, that he would take care of the tribe.
Yeah.
Or, the rest of the folks.
Mm-hmm.
And continue succeeding with what was happening, the multitude of nations and whatnot. Because he may not have thought that Jacob would be able to do that, because he's the
I'm sure that's what he thought. Because he loves Esau, so he doesn't see any of those strengths in Jacob at all.
Because Jacob is a mirror of Isaac.
Oh, yeah. Mirror opposite, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But also, if you look in verse 2, I underlined this in my Bible. It's when Isaac speaks, he says, I, I
Yeah.
or my.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
nothing to do with God or anything.
Yeah.
This is my decision.
This is my
I
decision.
am
Yeah,
doing
that's
it.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I think
all
there were
he's it's all he's
There were
looking
10
about.
different times where it's either me or my or I.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. But now think about this too. Esau knew what his father meant to do on this occasion. Why didn't he speak up or remind his father that the blessing or the birthright didn't actually belong to him anymore?
I wonder if the boys were told by Rebecca and Isaac
Yeah, we talked about that.
that, Jacob was supposed to
Yeah.
take over.
I think they were, when we did that lesson, we talked about that, but I think at least Jacob was told. Esau might have not been,
Because he was out.
unless they were told when they were very young, and he sort of did brush it out because he was busy with other things. But Isaac never brushed it out.
Did he think that, Isaac think that he could carry on the line with the Hittite women instead of marrying?
Well,
That's
true.
That's a great question. That was why it came to my mind that he was trying to bring Esau back to the family. Maybe if I give him this blessing, that he will seek out a wife to be able to carry this on with. But that's perfect. No, he could not do it with those. That may have played a big part of it too. So we can say that Jacob stole the blessing, but actually Esau was trying to steal it from Jacob. So now there's the problem. So now we have the plan.
Good old Rebecca.
Good old Rebecca. Verses 5 and 6. And Rebecca was listening. Listen, now notice this. Rebecca was listening while Isaac spoke to his son, Esau. So when Esau went to the field to hunt for game to bring home, Rebecca said to her son, Jacob. It's like, oh no. So, again, since Esau was married to two wives, we don't know, okay, as you said, we don't know, is he still living in the same tent? Is he still living in the same complex of tents? Or is he somewhere else? Oh, he's at least in the area. But at any rate, wherever he's living, Rebecca noticed that Esau went in to see Isaac. And so, like Sarah, she listened in. And then she went and got Jacob and said, behold, I heard your father speak to your brother, not to my son. She never calls him her son. To speak to your brother Esau, saying, bring me some game and prepare a savory dish for me that I may eat and bless. And notice she says that Isaac had said that I may bless you in the presence of the Lord. He never said that.
No, he didn't.
No.
But that's what she expected, or what we don't know if she was just exaggerating or if she thought that that's what he meant. But anyway, that I may eat and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now, therefore, my son, listen to me. Now, pay attention. As I command you. I mean, these are intensive verbs here. Listen to me. He may have had body language like, back. Listen to me. As I command you. Go now to the flock and bring me 2 choice kids, baby goats, from there, that I may prepare them as a savory dish for your father, such as he loves. Then you shall bring it to your father, that he may eat, so that he may bless you before his death. So, as we've seen, Rebecca is a woman of quick action. We saw that back in chapter 24 when she offered to water, give the man a drink, give the servant water, and to water the camels. And she doesn't do anything by small amounts. I mean, she's all in, whatever she's doing. And how quickly she was ready to come back with him. She's a woman of quick action. But that can be good or bad. But she just thinks this up on the spot. I mean, this is not something that she could have had planned in advance.
I don't know. She might have been thinking about it.
Well,
in case.
she may have been thinking about, if Isaac does something, what would I do? But how could she possibly have thought of this particular scenario?
Sure, about the goats and all
Yeah, all of that. But it's not something, I don't think it's something that she dreamed up just in case. And she said, listen to me. Time is of the essence. Now, some of the commentaries went into detail about how you would substitute a goat for venison.
I don't know how.
Trust me. Trust me on this. With the right seasonings, you can make anything taste like something else.
Oh, okay.
Since I can't have beef or pork or any of that,
Yeah.
there's turkey bacon, there's there's turkey bologna, or as Dennis the Menace once said, you can eat anything if you put enough ketchup on it. So, whatever she did, she knew how to season it. Whatever the meat was really didn't matter. It was all in the seasoning, and she knew how to do that.
They're both nasty. I'll tell you that much.
Well, I've not had either. Well, I've had venison. I like it the way I fix it, but I can't have it anymore. But anyway, so why did Rebekah do this? Was it because she loved Jacob, or because she knew that it was God's will that Jacob have the blessing? Was it a lack of faith on her part, or was it proactive faith on her part?
I don't know. I see the same eyes,
Yeah.
like they're taking the bull by the horns,
Yeah.
both of them, and they're just.
And it could be a little bit of both. Her motivating factor may have been the fact that God had given Jacob the birthright and the blessing, or said he would have it. But again, it's my son, and I'm going to do this for my son.
Why couldn't she just went in the room and said, "Hey,
Yeah.
God,
Hey, old man."
what are you doing?"
Yeah.
I mean,
What are you thinking, old man? Yeah.
I think after 77 years, they all forgot.
Yeah, I think you're probably right.
Like, was Esau around whenever Isaac knew that Jacob was gonna rule or whatever? Was Isaac around?
Well, that goes back to what God told Rebekah, and did Rebekah tell him?
True.
At the very beginning.
Yeah.
So what if Isaac had succeeded in blessing Esau?
God would have figured out something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or do you think God would have stopped it even if Rebekah had done nothing? And I fully think he would have. Mm-hmm. But this is a complete lapse of faith. We saw it in Abraham in chapter 12 when he went down to Egypt in the famine. We saw it in Sarah in chapter 16 in offering Hagar to Abraham. We saw it in both Abraham and Sarah in chapter 21 in Gerar. We saw it in Isaac in chapter 26 when he lied. And now we see it in Rebekah. And actually, if we think about it, Abraham is the only one who did finally, completely come to trust God in chapter 22. But God had spoken directly to Rebekah when she prayed. This is going to happen with the sense of, trust me, this is going to happen. So now this is a test of Rebekah's faith. God had said to Abraham, sacrifice your son. If God had said, if Isaac had been born to Abraham way back there when they first came into the land, and God said, sacrifice him, Abraham would have said, no way. But through all those things that Abraham went through, when God said, sacrifice your son, Abraham said, okay, yes, Lord. Because he knew, he trusted God, he trusted God to raise him from the dead because God had said that Isaac was to be the son of promise. So he had to be alive. Even if I sacrifice him, God will raise him up. And we saw that in that chapter. He had to live. In Rebekah's case, this was also her son whom she loved. what might have happened had she trusted God. Warren Wiersbe said that faith means obeying God no matter how we feel, what we think, or what might happen.
It's hard, though.
That's what I was going to say.
say.
Nowhere does it say that's easy to do.
Right. 'Cause
No.
we all have been in that boat and said,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to do this. And God goes, nope, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
Or you're just tired of waiting and you just
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
right ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's us because we want things
We
done,
want things
right?
done. We want to get it done. We want to be proactive. We want to God has said this, and I'm going to carry out God's will. Well, not by doing it that way. You're not. If she had waited, of course, this is all ifs, but if she had waited, perhaps God would have spoken to Isaac and said, "Don't do this." Or perhaps Esau would have been stricken with remorse and said, "We can't do this. It doesn't belong to me." And actually, Jacob should have said to his mother, "This is not right." But hey, when it's your mother, And let me note here, many of the commentaries point out that nowhere did God rebuke Rebekah or Jacob for what they did. And I saw that in a lot of the commentaries. And no, he didn't. He also didn't rebuke Abraham and Sarah for what they did with Hagar. And we know how that turned out. And we've said many times that sometimes the Bible is prescriptive. Sometimes the Bible says, "Thou shalt not," or "Thou shalt." Sometimes do this. But there are many times when it is simply descriptive, meaning it doesn't rebuke or it doesn't commend actions. We are waiting to see what the consequences are, to see if it was a good thing or not. And of course, by that time, it's too late because you're living in the consequences. And again, I think that God allowed them to have free will. He allowed them to trust Him or not. All of them, each of them, should have gone to God and said, "What is your will?" But they didn't. And again, like we said last week, maybe this is another case of situational ethics. This is what feels right. Or, as another commentary put it, it is never right to do wrong in order that right may be done. It's never right to do wrong. But then we
think about it. When was the last time God spoke to either one of them?
Yeah, it'd been a long time. Well, it's in chapter 26, but that's almost 40 years ago. And He's allowed them to do their own thing this long. After Ishmael is born, they didn't hear a word from God for 13 years. But this has been almost 40. Yeah. This has been a long time. And nothing has happened to either promote a blessing or not. And so Isaac, I'm going to do this. But then we see that Jacob, for his part, was more concerned with getting caught than with doing what was right. So in verses 11 through 17, and here we have the prep, or the preparation. And Jacob answered his mother, Rebekah, "Behold, Esau my brother," giving her all the excuses. "Esau my brother is a hairy man. I'm a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me. Then I shall be as a deceiver," or your translation may say mocker, and it would be mocking him for his blindness in his sight. "And I shall bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing." But his mother said to him, "Your curse be upon me," and it was. "Your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice. Go get them for me. Go and do it." So he went and got them and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory food, which his father loved. And Rebekah took the best garments. Translation may have a different word there. It said best garments of Esau. It's garments that he had. It says that was with her in the house. Now, wherever he was living or whatever, but she had these garments. And she took them and put them on Jacob, her younger son. They must have been pretty much about the same build. And then and she put the skins of the baby goats, on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. And she also gave the savory food and the bread which she had made to her son Jacob. Now, like we said, Jacob did express fear at getting caught. But if you remember last time in chapter 26, you didn't watch that one, but in chapter 26, we said that it was God's mercy that Isaac and Rebekah got caught in their lie. Sometimes it's God's mercy that you get caught before you get into worse trouble. And indeed, like verse 13, the curse would be upon Rebekah, as we'll see later. So here's the thing. We don't know if Rebekah had envisioned this whole plan all the way through, or if she figured it out as she went. So first of all, get me the food, and we'll cook that, and then we'll decide what to do about your skin. And so as they're skinning these goats and preparing it, whatever, there we go. There's
he must have been a really hairy guy.
Must have been a really hairy guy. But there it is.
Goat skin on there, and
These are baby goats, so it's real fine. It's real fine here, but still, it seems to be a lot of it. But if she figured it out as she went, the goat hair, that'll work. But at any rate, Rebekah is so determined that the blessing go to Jacob that she's willing to take that risk. But you got to imagine that the whole time this is going on, they got one eye on the door or out the window to see if Esau's on his way back.
And don't you think Isaac was smelling the food?
You would think.
Well, no, I take that back, because back in those cultures, well, and still today, at least what I've experienced, they have separate tents.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we saw that with Sarah and Abraham. So they're somewhere else cooking this food.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it all worked out, accounting for everything. Isaac couldn't see, but he could feel. Check, got that covered. He could taste. Check, got that covered. He could smell. Check, got that covered too. The only thing she couldn't cover was hearing.
Yeah, his voice.
His voice. Jacob apparently didn't sound like Esau, but they just have to chance that and depend on Isaac, what Isaac expected to hear. Yeah, sometimes you can expect something, and that's what you'll hear. So now in verses 18 through 27 we have the con, and now it's all up to Jacob. So he came to his father, and he said, well, when my translation reads, it says, I am Esau, your firstborn. Again, the word am is not there. What he said was, I, Esau, your firstborn. Now, if he had just simply said, I, your firstborn, it wouldn't have been a lie, a technical lie, because he had the birthright. But when he said, I am Esau, then it's a lie. I've done as you told me. Now, do this. Get up, please. Apparently, Isaac was in bed, maybe bedridden. Get up, please. Sit and eat of my game, that you may, you should also be your soul, that your soul may bless me. And Isaac said to his son, how is it that you have it so quickly, my son? He said, because the Lord your, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute. He said, the Lord your God caused it to happen to me. Then Isaac said to Jacob, please come close and I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not. So Jacob came close to Isaac his father, and he felt him. And he said, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's, and so he blessed him. And he said again, are you really my son Esau? And he said, I am. So Isaac said, bring it to me, and I will eat of my son's game, that my soul may bless you. And Jacob brought it to him, and he ate, and also brought him wine and drink. And then his father Isaac said to him, please come close and kiss me, my son. So he came close and kissed him, and then Isaac smelled the smell of his garments, and he blessed him. And he said, "See, the smell of my son is like the smell of the field which the Lord has blessed." So, on your lesson, I asked you to count the number of lies. Or to think about the lies that this family has told all throughout as long as we've known them. So the first lie, who are you? Or the first question, who are you? First lie, I am Esau, your firstborn. And then he adds an additional lie, eat my game. It wasn't game, it was goat. Second question, how did you find it so quickly? Second lie, the Lord your God caused it to happen. And now this is a bold-faced lie and using God's name in vain in a lie. And then in verse 24, Isaac asks him again the third question and the fourth lie. Are you really my son Esau? I am. And then the kiss. We could say that this too is a question and a lie. The father, Isaac, said to him, "Please come close and kiss me, my son." So he came close and kissed him. And when Isaac smelled the smell of his garments, he blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed." Who else betrayed someone with a kiss? Judas.
I
Exactly.
thought of that right away.
Yeah.
As soon as
There is another scripture somewhere in Samuel that someone betrays someone with a kiss, and I thought that was such an obscure example. I'm not going to use that, but we automatically, particularly this week, we automatically think of Judas.
Don't you think that the smell is not the field, but body odor?
You know, I thought about it. I bet he is sweating profusely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking mega BO.
Yeah.
if anybody's shaking uncontrollably,
Yeah.
it's him.
Yeah.
Am I
Am I going to get caught? I'm going to pull this off. Am I going to get caught? Yeah, and I'm sure he is watching out to see if Esau's coming in. Plus, yeah, he is sweating profusely. But now, with that kiss, the treachery has overtaken Jacob. I mean, if we've cut him slack all through this, well, maybe this and maybe that and maybe that. No, not now. He is fully given over. What should be reserved for true love for his father has become a means of deception. And with that and whatever smell it was, but the smell convinced Isaac. So now we have the blessing. And in this blessing, we have three types of blessing. First is the agricultural blessing, verse 28. Now may God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and an abundance of grain and new wine. Second is the lordship blessing. May peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. Now peoples is smaller groups of people like tribes, but nations are like large tribes. Many tribes together. So small groups, peoples, may peoples serve you and nations bow down to you. And then there is the patriarchal blessing. And may your be master of your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you. And again, this is when it says master of your brothers, it's not referring to the fact that Isaac and Rebekah may have more children, and that's not it. It's just in the wording, in how a blessing like this would go if there were more brothers, if there were more sons. But so now he gives him that third blessing. But did any of you notice what is left out of this blessing? Can you think of something that's left out?
Children.
Yeah, children is left out. But it doesn't specifically say descendants. So there is that. Look, an easier one, quicker one would be look back at chapter 26.
God's left out of it.
Verse 4. First of all, there is the descendants. I will multiply your descendants as the stars of heaven. And what else?
all the nations of the earth shall be blessed.
Yes. He doesn't specifically say here lands, so the land is left out, but it's that last part. By your descendants, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. If you go back to chapter 12, verse 3, the blessing that God gave Abraham, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. And that is the messianic blessing. Isaac is not going to touch the messianic blessing. He'll bless him in all these other ways, but he's not messing with that. I've told Joe, I said, this reminds me of the movie Tombstone. Doc Holliday says, my hypocrisy only goes so far. Isaac's hypocrisy only goes so far.
So you think he knew?
I think he knew exactly what he was doing. And I'll tell you, even more so in a minute, even Isaac wouldn't mess with the messianic blessing. But actually, when we get to the next chapter, chapter 28, he does eventually give Jacob that blessing, but not now. Why? Because he thought it was Esau, and he knew the messianic blessing would not go through Esau. So now we have the reveal, verses 30 through 41. Now it came about when, as soon as you just picture this. As soon as
one's walking out,
yeah,
one's walking in.
Yeah,
that's what I'm thinking.
As soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, that Jacob had hardly gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, and Esau his brother came in from the hunting. Now he wouldn't be coming into where Isaac was; he would be coming in with his hunt and preparing it. Verse 31. Then he also made savory food and brought it to his father, and he said the same words to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me. And Isaac his father said to him, who are you?
You'd think he could smell him.
Oh, he didn't have to ask. He knew. Who are you? I am your son, your firstborn, Isaac.
I wonder if Rebecca helped him prepare that meal
No,
too?
no.
He did it all by himself?
No, Jacob's not the only cook in the family.
So there had to be other people that were helping.
I think
it was Esau.
Esau prepared it himself.
Because, he's a guy out in the field, and he's got to take care of himself.
Yeah, the guys in the whole grilling out thing.
Yeah.
But so I don't know. So 30 through 30. Who are you? I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. And then let me find my place. Okay. So then, verse 33. Then Isaac trembled violently. Now, for a long time, and in fact, I had it open my Bible, I've been here a long time. For a long time, I didn't know if Isaac shook because he was afraid of God or if he was afraid of what Esau might do. But the more I've studied it, the more I think he shook because he was afraid of God. Like before, he was caught. Isaac was caught.
Isaac was caught because he knew he was going against God.
He did.
Yeah.
He knew that. The word for trembled is a word that means to shudder. But the word for violently takes 4 Hebrew words to interpret it. This is violently. They know another word for it in our English language. This is so intensive that it takes 4 Hebrew words to translate. It is fearful, shaking uncontrollably. And then he said, then who was he then that hunted game? He still thought it was game and brought it to me so that I ate all of it before you came, and I blessed him. And then he says, yes, and he will be blessed. And he knew. He already knew. That was a rhetorical question. He knew. And Esau was stunned. Esau, when he heard the words of his father, he cried out with an exceeding great and bitter cry, and said to his father, bless even me also, O my father. And then verse 35, and Isaac said, your brother came deceitfully and has taken away your blessing. Now, it was true that Jacob came deceitfully, but he did not steal Esau's blessing. It was his blessing. But the way he went about it was deceitful. So Esau explodes. And here we see Esau resorting to name calling. And he said, is he not rightly called Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. And the word Jacob's name, as we said in another lesson, the reason he's named that, it sounds similar to the Hebrew word for heel. And since the baby came out holding the heel of the first one, we see he was named Healer. Harry and Healer. Jacob is what that is. The word Jacob is when it's just a common noun, it is the word for heel. But when it is a proper noun, it is the name Jacob.
I guess it was a sermon that I listened to. They said that Jacob was named that Jacob because he would trip whoever.
Well, that's what he ends up doing.
Yeah.
But he was given the name originally simply because it had to do with the heel.
Mm-hmm.
That was neutral. At that point, they don't know what kind of man he's going to be. But that word is also used of someone who does trip someone else, like in a race. Mm-hmm. Saw that race sometime back. It was a relay race where the girl hits the other girl in the head. That's pretty much what it is. But it describes someone who would do that. And so Esau expounds on that. Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me. And that's the same word. These 2 times. Well, if Isaac didn't know about the birthright thing to start with beforehand, he knew it now. And because Esau elaborates, he took away my birthright, and behold, he has taken away my blessing. And here we see that Esau really didn't care about the birthright. The birthright came with responsibilities. It's the blessing that came with material gain. He doesn't care about the birthright. He only cares about the material gain. Hebrews 12, verse 17, I put that in your lesson, says this about Esau. The writer says, you know that afterwards, speaking of this incident, when he wanted his father's blessing, he was rejected. It was too late for repentance, even though he begged for it with bitter tears. And I've always read that with the sense of Esau begged for repentance. But he didn't. If you read this, he didn't. So what that verse is actually saying, it was too late for repentance. It was too late for Isaac to repent and change the blessing. That verse in Hebrews 12 is about Isaac, not about Esau.
What about back in Genesis chapter 3, whenever God says, from Adam and Eve, from now on you and the woman will be enemies, and your offspring and her offspring will be enemies, and one will strike the head and the other one will strike your heel. There's the heel again. I know that's a messianic.
Yeah, that is a messianic. Let me look at that right quick. Chapter 3, what verse?
15.
Yeah. I will put enmity, or I will put hostility between you and the woman, between your seed and her. Yeah. There's going to be that different ways of looking at things. Always, there's going to be enmity. We've got to learn how to get around that. Is what we have to do.
They didn't do it such a.
They didn't do it by this point, and so Isaac essentially says to him, "There's nothing to do about it." So verses 37 through 38. But Isaac answered and said to Esau, "Look, I have made him your master, and all his relatives, or his descendants, or his seed, I have given to him all of, wait a minute, brothers. Yeah, okay. I have made him your master, and all his brothers he's talking about Esau. I've given to Jacob as servants, and with grain and new wine I have sustained him. Now as for you, what can I do, my son? And Esau said to his father, do you only have one blessing? And I often thought about that. It looked like he could give him another blessing. I mean, say something good about the boy, but he didn't. What's really interesting here is that he doesn't. Do you only have one blessing, my father? Bless me, even me also, O my father. So Esau lifted his voice and wept. And I think at this point, Isaac knows he can't give him a blessing. And what he gives him instead is a prophecy. He says essentially there's nothing I can do about it. And then he does speak a word over Esau, but it's not exactly a blessing. I read that and I thought, if that's the blessing, I don't think I want it. So it's more of a prophecy, verses 39 through 40. Then Isaac his father answered him and said to him, behold, away from the fertility of the earth shall be your dwelling. And away from, this is almost opposite of what he said to Jacob. Away from the dew of heaven from above. And by your sword you shall live, and your brother you shall serve. But it shall come about when you become restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck. And this is very similar to the prophecy that was spoken over Ishmael. You're going to live by the sword, basically. And if you look at these things and you trace the Edomites all throughout the Old Testament, that you see every bit of this exactly happening to them. There's that fighting between them forever. And so then we have the epilogue. But any comments or questions before we go on to that?
Isn't it interesting that women caused this both times?
Mm-hmm.
You got two guys that just absolutely raised Cain against Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all because of Sarah and Rebecca.
Yeah, exactly. And the sad part is, on Sarah's part and maybe on Rebecca's, they thought they were doing the right thing.
Sure.
Obviously they weren't. And like you said, all of that, even, of course, we don't know who the Edomites are today, but we know there probably are descendants of them still. But they thought they were doing the right thing, but they were running ahead of God in both cases.
Probably the Palestine.
Yeah, maybe. So verses 41 through 46. So Esau bore grudge against Jacob because of the blessing with which his father had blessed him. And Esau said to himself, now it said when we read that, the literal translation says in his heart, but he's apparently saying it to some friends or some people who are close to him. But he said, the days of mourning for my father are near. He thought Isaac was going to die soon himself. And then I will kill my brother Jacob. If you think back, that's the same thing that Joseph's brothers worried about. When Jacob finally died and they're down there in Egypt, they were afraid that Joseph would have them killed because of what they'd done. So verse 42. So now when the words of her elder son, this is the first time. Just notice this. When the words of her elder son, this is the first time Isaac has been called her son. When the words of her elder son Isaac, I got to mark that or I'll forget that in the morning. Her elder son Isaac were reported to Rebekah. She sent and called her younger son Jacob and said to him, behold, your brother Esau is consoling himself concerning you by planning to kill you. Now therefore, listen to me again. Obey my voice. Listen to me. Arise, flee to Haran to my brother Laban, and stay with him a few days until your brother's fury subsides, until your brother's anger against you subsides. I'll have to look up the difference in that, the word fury and anger, see if that's different. But anyway, and he forgets what you did to him. Then I shall send and get you from there. Why should I be bereaved of both in one day? And the question comes up, why would she be bereaved of both of them? If Esau had killed Jacob, then there would have been, go all the way back, what chapter is it? The Noahic covenant. If one takes the life of another, his life will be taken, and she would lose both sons. So then, and this actually goes with the next chapter, Rebekah said to Isaac, and she's still manipulating, I am tired of living because of the daughters of Heth. In other words, because of Esau's wives. If Jacob takes wives from the daughters of Heth, like these, from the daughters of the land, what good will my life be to me? And like I said, this will carry over into chapter 28. But now think about this. As we said earlier, words of condemnation only come to Jacob from Laban, or from Esau now, and from Laban later on. God never condemns Jacob. God himself, as I said, never condemns Jacob. God is always blessing him. And we're like, after what he's done, well, look at how many times God blessed
in this whole chapter,
Abraham.
God's not doing anything.
God
he is.
He's letting it happen.
He's not
interfering. He's not interfering.
Yeah.
So God is always blessing him. Does this mean that God always approves of what Jacob does? No. God never approved of everything Abraham did either. But he always blessed Abraham because of the covenant. It's the same with Jacob. But Jacob will experience something that's called recompense. The first time I learned about that, it just really, I mean, there are so many examples of that in Scripture that I've started keeping a list of them at home. But recompense could be called judgment in kind. And again, we see this all throughout the Bible. Just a few examples. Pharaoh tried to drown the Hebrew baby boys, and Pharaoh's army was drowned. In fact, God referred to Israel as my firstborn. And when Pharaoh tried to destroy Israel, what happened to Egypt? The firstborn were killed. The Babylonians tried to have Daniel thrown into the lion's den. But what happened to those that tried to throw him into the lion's den? God saved him, and what happened to them? They were thrown into the lion's den. Haman, one of the most famous ones. Haman built a gallows on which to hang Mordecai, and Haman himself was hanged on that very gallows. I mean, you could go on and on. Like I said, I've started keeping a list. But in Jacob's case, Jacob would later be deceived, not only by Laban, but by his sons, and not just once by his sons, but 3 times by his own children. In this case, the deception was carried out using his brother's clothes. The deception would later be carried out. He would be deceived about Joseph's death by using Joseph's coat of many colors. And we have to be very careful. The world calls this karma. This is not karma. This is what we can call the law of the harvest. Galatians 6 verse 9, loosely paraphrased, says, as you sow, so shall you reap. Now,
What was that again?
Galatians 6 verse 9.
Thank you.
When you think about the law of the harvest, anybody who's ever grown anything, let's say corn. When you plant corn, what are you going to get? Corn. When are you going to get it? Later than you plant it. How much are you going to get? The same amount you planted or more?
Well, it depends upon the raccoons.
Well, yeah. We don't talk about raccoons and possums and all that kind of stuff.
Deer.
Deer. But generally, you get what you plant, more than you plant, later than you plant. And that's exactly what happened to Jacob. He got deceived worse later in his life and worse than his deception.
I wondered about how did Esau feel about Rebecca?
We don't know.
You know,
We never.
You know, because he had to have known.
I seem to have read something somewhere, but I don't remember where it was right
Some
now.
of this. I mean, she cooked the meal. Well, he cooked it, but I mean, she made bread and all that other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know.
yeah.
If I find what I was looking for, I'll tell you later. But I read something that had them, but I don't remember what it was. It may have been somewhere further on in the chapter. But this chapter is the end result of chapter 25, verse 28, that says, "Now Isaac loved Esau because he had a case for game, but Rebekah loved Jacob."
Mm-hmm.
Not only is everyone in this incident at fault, but everyone in this incident suffers. I could hear my mother saying, "You can't do wrong and get by with it." So, any other thoughts? Or I've got one other thing to take away to add, but any other questions or comments on any of this?
God still knew Jacob's heart.
Yeah.
Which is why he didn't smote him.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he could have zapped him. Yeah.
But God just let him. He let him have his own will.
Just like he does us.
Just like he does us, exactly.
He lets us have our own will, and then we pay the consequences for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And there are times I think, and you say, well, you know, I don't always know if I'm supposed to go ahead or if I'm not supposed to go ahead. But take that into account. But there are times when we do know.
Mm-hmm.
And we go ahead anyway.
Yes, you're right.
Mm-hmm. Or we look back.
Now looking back, I'm talking about there are times when we know.
But we shouldn't have.
Yeah. Another thing my mother used to say is, might as well say it as think it. And I'm like, no, I don't think I go that far. You can think it. I told my teenage son once, you can think whatever you want, but if you say it, I've got to do something about it. So here we began. We began by talking about if God allowed Isaac and Rebekah to follow their own hearts, did He allow them to have their own way? So guess what hymn came to my mind when I was reading that?
Have your own way.
Have your own way. Have thine own way, Lord, have thine own way. Thou art the potter, I am the clay. Mold me and make me after thy will, while I am waiting, yielded and still. And so that's all we can pray.
But you see this. You go back all the way to the beginning of Genesis, and this is just a repeat. You know,
it's all over through the Old Testament.
It is.
They just keep repeating it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You'd think that they'd learn, but because we read this, and there's 40 years difference between chapter 26 and chapter 27, and we're reading it one day to the next or whatever. We think of our own lives, think about 40 years ago. Do we remember a lesson we learned 40 years ago?
No.
Probably not. Last week, maybe. So, the period of time that it covers, it's like somebody told us last week in the Tuesday morning group, said, y'all watch too many Westerns. Because, we watch Grid all the time. So,
yeah.
But you see them and they're just repeating the same thing. The same thing. And so
But those old Westerns have good morals.
they do. Most of the ones we watch.
Just like Andy Griffith.
There's always a good moral there. Yeah.
Which is why we all turned out better than all.
No, that's another road we could go down there. So
because we were raised on Father knows best.
Leave it to
Andy,
Beaver.
Leave it to Beaver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Lassie.
Yeah, all the good ones.
Yeah, all the good ones.
So,
Highway to Heaven, remember that?
Oh,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
My
yeah.
dad used to sit in the recliner and watch that and he'd be, oh.
Oh, yeah.
You see that?
What was
Sis?
the
See that?
Roman Downey one?
Yeah, that's it. Highway to Heaven.
Highway to Heaven, yeah.
With Michael Landon?
Yeah, and Roman
Yeah.
Downey was in that. Yeah.
But she
Michael
didn't
Landon always had good
Yeah.
Yeah.
television programs.
Little House.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just I saw they were something about some cartoon or something. It was, or actually, it's comic thing. And Lauren Green was talking about little Joe. The next thing you knew, he was growing up and living in a little house on the prairie. Okay. Anything else? We're still recording here.
Oh.
Anything else? All right. Well, let's pray. Oh, Father, there's so much we can learn from this. Just so much.